So there's a file to download for today. So let's go ahead and get the file downloaded, get it authorized. It's one that we've worked with before. So this is the one where we were kind of building some lists. We wrote some code that would actually make unique lists here. So here we have the list of promotions. We've got the list of departments. And that's just like the departments from these products. So here's a bunch of different departments. And now over there, we've got the unique ones. Here's the unique manufacturers. Here's the unique categories. Okay, so this is like product data. And this is data that, whatever reason we need to maintain data that's like kind of in a list this way. You might think, we probably should be doing this in database somewhere. Well, you're probably right, but a lot of this stuff kind of ends up being manipulated in Excel as well. So for a spreadsheet, like this idea where I say, I've got values that I'm calculating in cells that depend on other cells. The structure of a spreadsheet's pretty good. For editing like a record that's shown in a spreadsheet, it's not so much. Because like when I'm on the task of editing this 18-inch mallard, like if my task is to edit this record, this is a really bad layout. What's so bad about it? Yeah.
It has like 2 kinds of data in one cell.
Oh, you're talking about a problem with like normal data, like database normalization. Oh, right here, like the title. Yeah, that's a problem. I'm not so worried about that. I'm like, that's just the name. It's kind of a weird name. And it might be interesting if we have that 18 inches somewhere else where it would be queryable, but I'm not worried about the structure of the data. I'm worried about what this interface is like for editing the data. This is a great screen. It's like a 24-inch monitor that I've got here. And it's like I don't know what the resolution is. I don't think it's a 4K monitor, but it's at least 1080p. I got a lot of pixels to work with here. And yet the only ones I care about are the ones in this narrow band. Like, and I can't even fit the whole thing on the screen. Well, I can, but I've got to like zoom way out. So I can make it tiny, then I can see the whole thing, but now it's got to be tiny. And I've got all these other pixels that I could be making use of, but they're useless to me in terms of editing this one particular cell. And so what we're going to see today is we're going to be introduced to a thing called a user form. I don't know why they call it a user form. Maybe it's a user, they call functions that we create user-defined functions. Looks like a user-defined form. But the idea is, most other environments would refer to it just as a form. We're going to say, listen, instead of taking this data and having it lined up in these different columns on one row, when I want to edit it, I want to put it onto a larger screen, put it onto a bigger window, and that window is called a form. And when I do that, I'm going to get a lot more flexibility in terms of what I can do with the data. I can put labels on it and maybe give some other tools that will make it easier to work with, and do some validation so that if the user, I can do some stuff with like data validation here, but I can even do more complex kinds of data validation if I make this into a form. So that's our goal. I want to be able to make a form that allows me to edit one of these effectively. So I'm going to come to my Visual Basic editor, and apparently I'm on the wrong version of this because I've already got one open. Alt F11. Oh, it is in this one. Do you have this? Have I opened the wrong one? Does yours have a form? Let's take a look and see if you have the same thing as I do. Oh, pay no attention to that form. We're going to make something like that, but apparently I gave you the solution for today. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. So remember that the only place that we can put code that will get saved with the workbook is in a module. And so far, the main module we've worked with has been this module down here, this general module. I think we saw example once of seeing the module that's built into the workbook. Like if I come up here and double click this one, it'll open up a module that's built into the workbook. It allows me to make some code respond to an event that happens in the workbook. Like every time the workbook opens, do this. Before the workbook closes, do this. But there's another kind of module, and that's one built into a form. So you always have this little choice for forms here. It doesn't always have a form built into it, but we're going to make one like this. But we'll start from scratch. So I'm going to select, well, it doesn't matter if I select that. I'm going to choose Insert, and then I'll choose User Form. So normally we're doing this module here. Now we're going to use User Form. And so that has now given me a new form to work with. I can make it a little bit bigger just by resizing the shape of it here. But let me go ahead and give this a name. The name that this form came up with was user form 1. It's like a default name. That's a really bad name. So I'm going to rename it by coming to my properties window, view properties. And then with my form selected, I should be able to just change the name right here on the top of the properties. I'll call this FRM prod. Apparently, FRM product is already taken. And that's kind of a convention when we start working with forms, that we're going to name things always with like a little 3-character prefix that tells me what kind of object it is. So, and you'll see why here as we get to it. So let's FRM. So I know if I'm looking at a bunch of object names and I can see that starts with FRM, I go, aha, that's a form. I got it. It's not critical. It's just a convention. But it's a pretty common convention in VBA. Okay. So now there are some attributes of the form that I can change. Like right here is the title. This is called the caption of the form. I'm going to change that caption by coming to the caption property and just putting a new caption here. I'm going to say edit product information. So my little project or my little properties window over here allows me to change many of the properties for a form. I could change the background color and the shape of the border and how wide the border is and so forth. Okay. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to give a way to see the product ID. So I'm going to bring on a control. Now, you may not have your list of tools here, in which case you're going to want to look for this button, Control Windows Plus. So kind of right here above your form, you've got this little thing here. It looks like a hammer crossed with a wrench. It always looks vaguely communist to me whenever I see that symbol. I'm always a little bit hesitant to click on it because you never know what's going to happen. But that's going to bring up this toolbox. So this toolbox has a set of controls. It seems like a weird word to me. These are all objects. They're visual objects that I'm going to put on my form that the user is going to use to control the data, I guess. I'm not sure where the term control comes from. So these are just objects I'm going to put onto my form. The first one here is no object at all. It's just saying, hey, you're selecting your pointer. But now I'm going to choose a different object, a different control. This is the label control. Once I select that control, I'm going to come back to my form and I'm going to click and drag to bring that onto my form to create an instance of that. So now here's a thing called label 1. I don't like label 1. That's a bad name. So I'm going to call it LBL, a prefix to indicate that I'm dealing with labels. And I'll call it ID, LBL ID. Well, that's a name. And I guess I should zoom out because it's taking me all over the place. Windows minus. So that's the name I will refer to this object by in code, which I'll need to do. So now, I think what I'd like to do now is kind of color this. What I want to do is I want to put the product ID in there. And a label is where I can put text. As the programmer, I can put text into this, but the user can't change it. It's static text as far as the user is concerned. Programmatically, I can change it however I want to, whenever I want to, how often I want to, that's all fine. But the user doesn't get to change the text that goes in here. So I want to do something to kind of indicate, yeah, this is a data field, but it's one that you can't edit. And so I'm just going to come to I have that label selected. And I'm going to come over here to properties and I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm going to change the border style. So border style from none to single. And it looks like a fine color that's on it, but I think I also want to change the background color to kind of a little bit darker gray. So back style is opaque. Back color, here it is. So back color, and I can either say, you know what, pick up a color from the way your system's defined, because you may have a different coloring set up for your buttons and your highlighted windows and such. Or I can come to the palette and say, you know what, I just want a particular shade of gray. So there's a shade of gray, a little bit darker. Maybe I want it even a little bit darker than that. Choose the third one down. And maybe I want the text to be centered in there. So there's probably a text align attribute down here, and I'll change that to be centered. So that's going to be like when I open this form up, I want it to get the data from there. And why don't we go ahead and let's also, so next, next let's put on like like something that the user can edit the name of the product. All right, so that sounds, it's gonna be pretty easy. So I'm gonna come back here to my tools, and the next tool over looks like a little square with an A and a B in it. That's called a text box. I'm gonna click that to select it and then click and drag to get my product name. And this one, I'm going to give it a name as well. So it's a text box, so I'll call it txt name. And then that will be where I put the product name. This one, the user can change. This is editable text for the user. Let's do one more before we actually start putting some code on this. And let's bring in a button. Now, down here, there's one called the command button. That's the one I want. They have one over here called an option, like a toggle button and an option button, but I'm after the command button. That has the kind of look you're used to seeing for a button. So I'll select that, and maybe I'll just go ahead and click and drag down here for like I'll make this like into a save button. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a name because it's a command button. I'll call it CMD save. And for the caption on this, I'll say save. This has an interesting property called default. You get to have one button as the default button. And so if I set the default property to true, that will make it so if the user is working along this and presses the enter key, it will be identical to clicking on this button. So making it the default, you press enter, it's just like clicking on the button. Looks like I've made that a lot bigger than I really wanted it. I'll make it just a little bit smaller. All right. Now, so far, all the code that we've written has just been code that sits in a module, and the user has to do something to expressly say, I want to run that macro. Run that subprocedure, and then all the code in that subprocedure runs. Things are a little bit more complicated when we're making a form, because instead of just having one macro that runs, we're going to have lots of little blocks of code that respond to the user doing something. So like when the user clicks on this button, we've got a little block of code that runs. When the user edits text here, when they are done editing that text and they leave that field, we're going to do something. Maybe at that point, we'll do something to check to make sure that it's right. So what we've done so far in our coding has been, let's write a block of code to really do something great and impressive. But now we want to think of making little blocks of code that we have respond to different occurrences in the form or different events in the form. And so it's a really kind of a mind shift. And so let's do the first example here, and we'll have it, what we'll have this do is just close. We're not having it save yet, but it'll just be closing the form. So I'm going to right click this. Actually, I'm going to double click this, and it's going to open up the code module that's built into this form. So I can kind of switch back and forth between the form view here and the code view here. Like these buttons here will kind of take me back and forth between looking at the form and looking at the code. And now it has guessed, it has said, here's the name of the object. In fact, if I drop this down, here's all the objects that I have. I've got the form itself, and then I've got the label ID, the text name, and the command button. And it has guessed at which event I want to respond to. And it literally is the name of this procedure. Here it says the name of one of the objects, underscore, the name of an event, and this will automatically get executed when this object, CMD save, receives the click event. That's what will cause this to be executed. And what I'm going to say is, I want to say the name of my form. I want to close the form. So FRM prod. Actually, I'm going to say unload FRM prod. So unload product will say you're done with this form, and that will close the form. So far, so good. And it's pretty reasonable, right? When you click on that, that's going to cause this code to execute. I'll run this. I'll go ahead now. If I run this, it's going to just show the form. Macros are disabled. What have I done? I better save, close, and open again. Go ahead and save it as my new name, winter of 24. Enable macros. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll run this, and it brings the form up here. And when I click on that save button, it's going to just close the form. But here's what I'd like to do, just to drive home the fact that this is event-driven. There are lots of different events that I can choose from. I'm going to stick on my same button here, the CMD save, and I'm going to change this from click over here. Say, wow, there's lots of different events that I can choose from. I'm going to choose this one, mouse move. The mouse move event now gets triggered every time the mouse moves within the boundaries of the object. So if the mouse moves even 1 pixel, it's going to execute the code that we have in here. So here, let's do something that's going to be a little bit kind of fun to work with. I'm going to say, let's change something about the button. So the button is CMD save dot left. There's a property of it called left. That shows how far the button is from the left of the screen, from the left edge of my form. And what am I going to do? I'm going to set that equal to a new value. What's it going to be? A random number. That's going to be a random number between 0 and 1 times the form. Oh, you know what? I'm going to detour right here because it's really unusual to refer to a form by its name inside the code. I forgot to do this. So that unloads the name of the object, form prod, but there's like a nickname, there's an alias for the form. When you're working on the code inside the form, it's just me. So me says, you know, this is the form that this code is running. So I'm going to use the same thing down here. It'll be a random number times me dot the inside width. So whenever this command button receives the mouse move event, this code will run. And what does this code do? It's going to change the left property of this to be some random proportion of the width of the form. This is not the normal behavior you expect from a button. So I'm moving the mouse around. Has it triggered that code yet? No, because is the mouse move event happening? Yeah, it's happening like crazy over all these other objects in the form itself. But the moment that it happens over the button, it moves the button. It's changing the left property of that button. Is it possible for me to click on this button? It is, but it would have to move. It would have to happen to move right under my, oh, darn it, I had it. It would have to move right under the mouse. That was close. Fortunately, I already set up the default property. So I can hit enter and it'll be just like clicking on it. That's a good thing. Now, one thing that was a little bit undesirable about this is that sometimes it's going to, because the left of it is set to anywhere a random proportion of the whole width of it, it can go like off the screen. I think it could go to where it's like barely even showing. Oh. Yeah, I think it's like all the way off. I wasn't expecting to get that far off. It's way over here. Yeah, I don't even think I can trigger it at this point. So that's undesirable. So what I'd like to do is subtract something off of that first. And what I really want to subtract off is the width of the button itself. So CMD save dot width. So now it's not, yeah. Now the random proportion, it can't, the left of it can get set to the whole width of the screen minus how wide that button is. And so it will not go, it shouldn't be able to, it should be able to go right up to the edge, but shouldn't be able to go off the edge anymore. I should be able to do this a bunch of times and it will never pop off the screen altogether. That's a little bit better. Okay. But just because, I want to make the game even funner, let's also modify the top property of it to be the inside height minus the command saves height. So now it should just move in 2 dimensions. And we'll do one more thing on our little example here, just because this would be really fun to watch Edna from accounting deal with this when it pops up for. And that is, I'm going to write this joke part in code, and we're going to see if you get it, if you understand what it's going to do. Look at that line of code, and what is this going to do now every time the mouse moves over the button? Anyone want to tackle it? Take a stab? Could run it and see it. What's he going to do?
It's going like change the size of the actual window.
The size of what?
The save button.
Yes. In fact, not just change it, but it's going to make it. Oops. You guys look at my code going, I have no idea what that does. That should be a minus. Oh, that makes sense now, Professor Allen. You're giving us a hard one there. That would have set the width to false. False is 0. I think it would have executed and it would have made it disappear. Let me just see if that's true. I think that's like legal code. Yeah. Because this expression is false. The width does not equal 2. And false, when it tries to convert to a number, will convert to 0. But what I want is a minus sign there. So what that's going to do is it's going to shrink a little bit each time it moves. It probably won't be noticeable at first, but the more I go after that button, eventually it's going to go, is that button? Oh, it is. It's getting smaller each time I get to it. Oh no, if I'm going to get this, I better hurry. No. Okay. So that's, I don't know that you would really do that. Oh, here's what you might do. Here's why you might really do this. If month of now equals 4 and day of now equals 1, then, yeah, you see what this does now? This really limits the time that that button's going to behave that way. And when will it behave that way? April Fool's Day. Yeah. So that button's going to act normal every other time. And on April Fool's Day, it's going to jump around like crazy when you try to get to it. It's good to have that if statement on because I've learned after doing this example a few times, I will forget that that code's on there. I'll go to click on the button. It'll dance right out of the way. So that's good. So now I think we're going to be okay. It should behave normal today since it's not April Fool's Day. We'll just go right there. I was on my mission in the late 1980s. So we just barely were mission homes getting computers to do stuff with. And I think I told you, I started with computers pretty young, like age 12. So I was pretty comfortable working with computers. So I was, for a brief time, I was the mission clerk. Is there a mission clerk? Finance clerk? In a way. Like we were between finance clerks and it's like, mission president was like, we want you to come and be the finance clerk. It happened that April Fool's Day was during that time. And so I did something on the computer, and it was always like one of the older sister missionaries that came in and started the computer on for the day and whatever, but I made it do something really strange, like kind of flashed on the screen. It was all before Windows. It was just character based, and kind of flashed on the screen and said, system error, fatal system error in progress, like place keyboard on top of monitor to allow positive reionization or something, So, and just wished that I could have been there when it happened, but apparently she actually did all the things that it was to do. It's like, she put the keyboard on top, it's like, now press enter. And then it like flashed a little bit more. And then it was like, darn near fatal, averted, press to continue. And then it kind of went on to normal. And it was kind of like this. It only happened on that, like the first time it ran on that day, and then it was gone. So she tried to show it to someone else and it just behaved like normal. So I guess me and April Fool's Day with computers have a long history. All right. So now what I'd like to do is I would like to start to actually get the data onto here. So let's go back and look at the, I'm going to choose to a different object. I'm going to choose to the user form itself. And what I want you to do, so it's guessed. Oh, you probably want to do something when the user clicks on the user form. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out what's the right event to actually happen when the data is going to load into the user form. When do I want to put the data from the row onto the user form? And it says, you probably want to do that when you click. And that's wrong. I don't want to do it when the user clicks, but I want you to look at these other events here and see if you can guess which event it might be. You would have no reason to know what these are so far. So just kind of look at these and say, maybe it's that event. Poor mouse.
So we're asking to see when do we want data put into the form?
Yeah, to make this code execute, I've already told you the form is the object I want, and it's when that form receives the event. Just like that little last block of code that we wrote, it's when the button receives the mouse move event, it executes. Now, when the form receives a different one of these events, that's when I want the code to load. But what's the event? It's not click. That would be to load the code. These would have to like open the form and then click somewhere on the form to load the code. I don't want that. Initialize. You're just looking at the name going, I wonder if it's initialized. In fact, the two candidates that seem pretty good to me are initialize and activate. And the truth is either one of those would work in our context. The difference between initialize and activate is initialize happens the first time that form gets loaded up into memory. So we load it up into memory and that triggers the initialize. Now, if I have two forms open at the same time, I can set them up to where I can go back and forth between them. Each time I go back to this form, it will activate. It'll trigger the activate event. So I don't want it like, they'll be the same here because I'm not planning to have two forms open together. So either one would work, but I think initialize is the right one. So it's when the form loads up, then that's when it's going to run the code. So I'll select this, initialize, and now it's given me another sub-procedure when the user form receives the initialize event. It made this one on the way. I don't really want that one. I'll delete it. All right. Now, what I'd like to do, I think might be helpful. It might be helpful for me to have a module level variable called row. Dim row as a long integer. And now when I initialize, I'm going to say, you know what? That row is I'm going to read whichever row the active cell is on and put that value into my row variable. So I'm just, when this gets initialized, I'm going to say row equals active cell dot value. And then I'm going to want to show the data. And I could put all the code for showing the data right here. But I think my code would be organized a little bit better if I actually had a sub-procedure called show data. And then I just invoke that sub-procedure from here. So I will just call show data. And then I'll come somewhere, maybe I'll do it at the very top. I'll make a sub-procedure here called show data. Now, show data is not going to get executed automatically at all because it's not an object name underscore an event name. But when the user form receives the initialize event, I'm telling it to run the show data subprocedure. Okay, and so here what I would like to do is I would like to put something into my label. I made that LBL ID object. So here I'm going to do it right here. LBL ID dot, and it's got a property called caption. So the label's caption is going to equal, now my data is on a sheet called data. So it says products, the sheet says products on the label or on the tab, but it's called data. Its code name is data. So data is the name of the sheet. Dot cells, and which cell do I want? I want row number row, whichever row I'm on. Column number 1. I think that's where the ID is. Yeah, it's ID is in column A. And I want to read the value. So I'm reading the value off of whichever the active row is, column 1, on my data sheet, and I'm putting it into the caption property. I'm reading it out of the cell and putting it into the caption property of my control. I'm going to do something really similar for my txt. I forgot what it was called, so here's a little trick. Like if I say me dot, it goes, oh, you're talking about this form, txt. It's going to take me to all of my text boxes. And there I can see it, txt name. And I can take, at this point, I could take the me off. It's not necessary, or I can leave it there. That's fine too. So the text box doesn't have a caption property. It has a value property. And that is, I think the name's in column 6. I'll type in a 6 there. I'll go verify. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the name is in the 6th column in my data. So now when the user form gets initialized, it should say, oh, let's go ahead and read the whatever row we're currently on, and then show data, which is going to use that row variable to say, from that part of the sheet, let's read data off the sheet and put it into the proper places on my form. So I'll run this, and I have a type mismatch. It's actually kind of interesting because I don't get much help with this. Is it even taking me to the right line? No, I think it's this, because the real value here is called text. And maybe the value property is something different. Maybe it has to be numeric or something. I'm sure the text property will work. Well, maybe I'm not. Label.caption, it's a lot value. That should be okay. Someone see my problem? Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're going back cell.value, that's not.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, what should that be? It shouldn't, you're right, it shouldn't be value. What should it be? Yeah, row, that's what I was after. Thank you. All right, let's try it again. There we go. So now it opens, and it's put the ID here, and it's put the name of it, the name of my product. I guess I'm on one called the Canada Goose Floater. There it is. I can change that right here from floater to sinker and say save. Did it change the data? No. Why didn't it change the data? The button says save right on it. Oh, the user, yeah, it's good. It's a good point. The user cannot change this. Like there's no way for them to click and change this. This is not editable to the user, but this one is editable. Right? The user can come and actually change what this control is showing. But when I say save, it's not. Why isn't it saving? Go ahead.
Well, it says save, but that's just what we call the button. We haven't code like right now I'll change back into the spreadsheet.
That's exactly right. So yeah, it'd be wonderful if I could just say, oh, save, and like it would know like what I want to do with this. Maybe generative AI will get there sometime. It's not there yet. I could probably formulate a question to Gemini or ChatGPT and ask it to write VBA code that would save text from a text box and write it to the active cell. Should we try it? Let's try it. What would it do? I don't know. How many of you use ChatGPT to write VBA code in this class? Only half of you? I'm disappointed. Chat to supercharge your ideas. How can I help you today? All right. Write a VBA sub-procedure to save text from a text box on a form to the active cell. What do you think? Okay. Oh man, that was so easy. I'm gonna bring this into, is there a copy button? Use code with caution. Okay. Let's just see what it does. This is the first time, I think this is the first time I've ever asked it to write VBA. So dim's form is an object, set form equal to this worksheet form main. Interesting. Workbooks, worksheets, form main. Active cell, text input dot value. Set text input. This code is not even close to what we don't want. Darn it. All right. We're on save. So unfortunately, that wasn't very helpful. So here's what we want to do. What I did here was I said, listen, I'm taking a value from the spreadsheet and I'm putting it into a property of the text box. What do I want to do when I save? It's not the same thing. What do I want to do when I save? Go ahead.
Take the property of the text box, put it in the list.
Yeah, I want to do exactly the opposite. I want to change what's in the text box. So I will just set that location equal to what's in the text box. I literally just flipped that line around. It's exactly the opposite. And so now, when I run this, if I change my floater to a sinker and hit save, watch it change right here. I hit save and it changed to sinker. And I don't need to do anything analogous for my caption because there's no way for the user to change the value of that. Okay, this is the basics of working with controls on forms in VBA. Show me your comfort level with what we've done so far today. 0 to 5, 5, 5, 3, 4, 4, 4, okay. If only it were all this easy. Let's look at some of the different controls then that we have to work with. Okay, so next one, switching back over to my form, can click on View Object. And what do I have next? What's my next thing? So here, I've got, next one is a category. All right, let's go ahead and put it on something to deal with, allow the user to pick the category. The last thing I want is for the user to be able to type in anything they want for the category. We've got a list of categories. Don't be making up new categories on the fly. In fact, if you want to make a new category, here's what you'll do. You'll come and add that category to our list of categories on this form or on this sheet. And that will be that's where we'll say this is going to be what our list of categories is going to be allowed. So different kind of control for this one. What I'm going to do is use, I'll use the very next one. This is called a combo box. It's called a combo box because the combination of the text box, what we just used, and the list box. Maybe we should do the list box first, but we're already on the combo box. A list just gives you a list that's kind of always open. You can choose the items on the list that you want. A combo box says, oh, this looks like a text box and you can type into it. But when you drop it down, it shows you a list that you can pick from. And so we'll bring that on right here. I'll choose that and I'll show it here. It doesn't look like it was that wide, so that's probably wide enough for my category. Now, in this case, I've got this as a non-editable thing, upper left-hand corner. I don't think I need to tell folks that's the product ID. I think you'll be able to identify the name by the fact that it looks like the name of a product. So I don't have to say name, but this one, I think I probably want to label as category. So I'll just bring in a label and put the label on it that says category. So it's really not a label for that combo box. It's just a label that I'm putting next to the combo box. And I don't know if you can tell or not, but it looks like it's got a background on it because it's kind of covering over my little grid over here. I don't know why they default that to having a pattern on the background. I don't like it. I'm going to change the background style to transparent. So instead of opaque, I'm going to make it transparent. And that way, in case in the future, if I do change, it happens to be like the same color as the background color. In the future, if I change the background color, I want these labels to be just kind of transparent backgrounds. Now the trick is, I've got two things. One is, how do I get the value showing in this combo box? Well, let's go ahead and give this the name. So instead of combo box 1, I'm going to call it CBO for combo and category. CATEGORY. CBO category. Well, putting the value in here is just the same as doing it for a text box. So I'm going to come to the initialize. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to come to my show data. And I'll probably even just copy this line down. But it's now going to be my combo boxes text is going to be equal to what's ever in row 2 or column 2. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing to save it. I'm just going to flip those around. So the text box part of this should be working at this point. If I run this, it should load in the category, and you could come in and type. Right now, we're actually letting them change it. We'll have to change that. But we haven't done anything to tell it where the list comes from. So the drop-down list hasn't been configured yet. That's next. All right. The way that we get a value into that list is with a method of the object called add item. So CBO category dot add item. And then I just give it the value that I want to put in there. Howdy. It's not a very good list yet, but that should give me a list that says howdy. So each time I say add item, it will put another item on that list. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go read the values off of my lists worksheet. So let me dim x as an integer for x equals 1, actually 2. Actually, let's do it as a do loop. Do until lists dot cells row number x, column number 8. I don't know. Let's see what column number it is. F. That's like 8, 7, 6. Column number 6 value is equal to a 0-length string. Loop. Better put in a do events because it's a do loop. And better increment my x. Probably should have called it R because I'm using a row, using it for a row. So now instead of adding howdy in my loop, I'm just going to add whatever is on the current row of that column. And so now when we're going through the show, we're going to go ahead and put the value up there in from the sheet, and then we're going to build that list. What do we mean the items, the options to choose from. So now when I run this, I get an object-defined error. cbo_carry.add or value until list.cells x6 integer. Oh, I haven't ever given x a value. So x is going to start at 2. So now when I drop down that list, I've got the different categories to choose from here. Now I still have the ability to change it. And that's probably, yeah, change it to duck. So I've got to do something to change it so I can't just change it because it's a combo. I can type or, like I'm allowed to either type or choose. So I'm going to want to adjust that. But let me give you a moment with this code. So there's going to be a property of this combo box that says, hey, do you want to limit the user's options to what's on the list? Or do you want to let them pick off the list and type in anything they want? And so I'm going to come back to the form, select the object, and I think it's called like limit to list. Is that right? The style width. Now I've forgotten the name of the property that restricts it. Got the combo box selected. Maybe I don't remember how to do it at all. Only we had some connection to a smart computer. How to limit a combo box to only choose from the list in a VBA form. Drop-down style autocomplete. All right, drop-down style. It's making me think I've never done this before in this class. It doesn't even sound familiar. Plain arrow ellipse reduce. Yeah, I don't think that's it. I think that's what that button's going to look like. Yeah, arrow is what I want there. Anyway, I don't remember how to do that. So, oh, is that, do you see it? Match required? Match entry? Oh, match required. Very good. There it is. Now that you say it, I think I have done that before. That sounds familiar. Yeah, if I try to leave off that field, it just doesn't let me. Apparently, I just made that an arrowhead category. That'd be a crazy arrow. Okay, so that is the combo box. I'm lost. Form prod. Any questions on the combo box? Yeah.
So if we start writing in text, it's like, it's gonna say like do something. If I click enter, like fill in the category all the way, it just saves and closes the whole window.
Oh, really?
So is there a way that we can say like, you click enter to finish filling out category without closing the window? I mean, like stagger, I suppose, when enter does something.
Yeah, good question. So the real answer is don't hit enter, hit tab. Tab will select. Could we say, I want to say, hey, when the user like types a key on this, we want that to happen. We certainly could take the enter off of the other button by not making it not the default. But yeah, there's actually like there's a key up property here. Hit save. And let me come back to my form. And I'm not sure if we can interrupt that enter or not, but we can make this thing respond to the user typing an enter key. So I'm going to choose now an event. Let's try key up. Yeah, button. So let's just do this. Right now I'm going to do a debug.print of the shift value by value button. It seems like we should get something. That's the mouse up. I don't want mouse up. I want key up. Yeah, so we're getting a key code on this. So it's passing in a key code. So I should be able to see what the key code is for an enter character. Let's see what that does. I'll run this. I'm on here. If I type something I know, like a capital A, it printed that 65. What does it do if I press an enter? I don't recognize any of those as the enter sequence. So it may not have actually, it may be that the form interrupted that before we got there. So we'd have to take it off that and then we could make it respond to the enter character. It's not as simple because it's not like saying, oh, do something special when this one presses enter. We have to look for that code directly. All right. I am looking for my form again. Okay, so my next one is, let's go ahead and do department next. Now, I'm going to do something on department that I probably wouldn't really do for department in practice, but let me, I'm wondering why that's closing when I open that. Doesn't quite seem right to me. Alt F11. Oh, I want to get onto the form. That's why. Prod form and then show the button. Okay, so we're after kind of looking at a new kind of control. And for this one, we're going to use the option button and the frame. So option buttons are mutually exclusive buttons. I click one, if there's another one clicked, it will uncheck it. And so if I put option buttons directly on the form itself, like all those option buttons are one logical set. Seems like I'd want to be able to say, I've got one set here, another set here, another set here. And the way that I make those sets separate is by putting them into a frame. So I'm going to bring this frame on here. Select the frame and then click and drag to draw it. Now, I'm not going to worry about changing the name of this because I'm not going to refer to this name through code, but I am going to change the caption. This is the department, right? So I'm going to change the caption of this to be department. And then inside that frame, I'm going to bring in 4 option buttons. I have 4 different departments. They're outdoor, apparel, general, and hunting. So I've got one there. I'll copy and paste it, 2, 3, 4. Just kind of drag these out to space them about. Seems like they should line up better than that. There we go. And these I'm going to go ahead and name. So first one, let me go kind of peek at my list. Hunting, outdoor, general, and apparel. I think I really want the general to be last because it's the one that's basically other. So hunting, outdoor, apparel, and general. So I'm going to change the name of this one to OPT hunting. Caption will be hunting. Outdoor is next. OPT outdoor. Caption is outdoor. Next is apparel. And then general. Now, the nice thing about option buttons is that you can get at them with one click. If it's a combo box, it's one click to drop down the list and another one to choose it. Option button is just there. You click it. It's kind of visually nice. And so that's good. But the downside is, oops, I think I forgot to save the caption on this one. Caption. G. The downside is that I got to add a new button each time I want to make a new choice. Like if we all of a sudden come up with another department, it's not just a matter of changing a new department on a list somewhere and it'll show up. I got to come and modify my form. Now, it turns out I can create these options dynamically through code. So I could read these off of a list and go create them and plug them in here. That's way beyond what we're going to do on our first day of forms. So you can make them dynamic, but it's a more advanced thing. So just kind of realize that if you're choosing an option button, it's usually best for things where you'd say, not only is it unlikely that it's going to change, like it's not going to change. Like if I want to choose yes and no, those are the only options. This would be good. So I'm kind of a little bit hesitant to even show this example because like to really make the option buttons work well for department, that if I change the data, they'll show in is really much more complex code. But at least it'll show you how these buttons work. Now, so far, we've been able to put values in with a single property, but this is going to be a little bit different. So let's go ahead and take a look at our show data. Okay, so now when I show the data, maybe I'm going to go ahead and, it's getting a little bit complicated here, so I'm going to go put some notes in. This is my category combo. And then here's where I'm starting my department option buttons. All right, now an option button, it has a value property, but the value is either true or false. It's either on or it's not on. And so I need to be a little smarter here to look at my code. So I'm going to say, if, and I'm still looking now, I think we're on the third, are we on the third column? I think we're looking on the 1, 2, yeah, we're on our third column. We want to see if that says hunting, then we want to check the box. We want to check the option button that is hunting. So I'm going to do here, maybe I'll do a select case statement. Select case, and then we're in column 3 of our data sheet. So the value of column 3. And end select. Okay, so if it says hunting, Now, normally the way we do this is we'll put onto another line down here, and here we'll say OPT hunting dot value equals true. I don't have to worry about setting the other ones false because setting one of them to true in the set will automatically set the other ones to false. But because I only have one line to execute, this code will actually look a lot better if I bring these two statements onto the same line. And the way I do that in VBA is I separate them with a colon. So I'll put a colon and then put this one here. That lets me put two statements on the same line. In VBA, we assume one statement per line. If you want to put a statement on 2 lines, the underscore character lets you break one statement onto 2 lines. You want to put 2 statements onto 1 line, the colon is what does it. So now I've got, let's see, what came after hunting? Outdoor. Apparel. And general. And I might come in here and say case else. What should we do if it's not any of those? Maybe we'll just put up a message. Message box, invalid, category. Setting to general. We'll put a VB critical on that, which will put a red X and use it at appropriate critical sound. And then I'll put a caption on here that is, or a title bar on here that's like data error. And then I will go ahead and on this one, I'll set the general to true as well. Or I'll set the value of the general option button to true. So now, when I run the form, if I'm on hunting, it brings up hunting. If I'm on something different, outdoor, it brings up outdoor. If I'm on one that's not one of those, invalid category, setting to general, it comes up checked at general. So now when I hit save, it should put general in there, but it's not yet because I haven't written the save part for this, which is what we're doing next. Where's our save? Here's save. Oh, this one has got to be in reverse. We got to look at each button, find out which button is checked, and then write out the appropriate label. Oof. The truth is, we could make an array of all of these, and we could make a loop that goes through and it looks at each caption to see which one is. But that's more than we want to tackle on our first day of form. So we'll do it by hand. I think for this one, I'll use the if then else. If CBO hunting dot value, and that's going to be true or false itself. So I can just do that. If that is true, then what do we want to do? We want to say that our current row, column 3, value is equal to hunting. Else if and we'll want at least 3 of these. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so if hunting's value is true, we'll do hunting. If apparel's value is true, then our value is apparel. If it's outdoor, and it's outdoor. Otherwise, it's general. I've just spelled it wrong. APPAREL. All right, so one of my products over here. Open this one up, setting it to general. I'm going to set this to apparel, say 6. It's interesting. That means that that general one is not a part of the set. See how it's staying on when the other ones are switching out? So it just must mean that I don't have it quite inside the boundaries. But it sure looked like it was in the boundaries. That's awesome. I'm going to make my thing bigger so I can make sure it's really in there. Yeah. Wow. Maybe those are not in it. Those are definitely all 3 inside of it. I don't have any idea why that's not behaving that way. Interesting. I'm inclined just to delete it and create it again and see what happens. In my many decades of doing this, I've never experienced that.
That's if you didn't change your value to, you said OVO for all of your options instead of OPT in your code, I think. Maybe.
Interesting. That shouldn't change, like anything I named in the code shouldn't have changed the way that it, like the set that it behaved as a part of. So my code may be wrong, which we'll go address. This is general. With a caption of something was a little bit screwy when I was putting the properties in. Now it's behaving the way I expected it to. I'm not sure what I did to that, but we're back. Oh, we just want to make sure that it's saving. And that'll be a good place to stop for the day. Oh, and here's what you're saying. These shouldn't be CBO, they should be OPT. Opt. And that's saving. Okay, that should be it. We'll continue with this example on Monday. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed. You're too kind. You're too kind. All right, we'll see you next time.